While we're waiting, I just want to say welcome to those of you who have just joined to the Interfaith Power and Light Youth Leader Shout Out webinar. We have an exciting evening planned. My name is Sarah Paulos. I'm the Interfaith Power and Light National Programs Manager. Interfaith Power and Light is a network of 40 state affiliates and a national office. Together, we inspire and mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. This webinar is a joint project of the IPL network, including the national office and several affiliates: North Carolina, California, Minnesota, and IPL DMV that serves Northern Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. And we'll get started in just a minute. We'll wait. While we wait for the participants to log in, I want to thank Sarah Ogletree from North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light for moderating this evening's webinar. And I want to thank all of our fabulous speakers tonight from all over the country. And for those of you just getting on, welcome to the Interfaith Power and Light Youth Leaders Shout Out webinar. We'll get started in just a minute as soon as most participants have logged on. I want to thank you all for joining this evening. Please place your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box. That's at the bottom of your screen there, just in case we have time for questions at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the IPL National and North Carolina IPL's YouTube channels. Plus, all registrants will also receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And it looks like we are ready to start. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah Ogletree.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in our country. My name is Sarah Ogletree, and I'm the program coordinator at North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light. And it's my honor to welcome you to our call tonight. As Sarah said, this webinar is a joint effort between our National Interfaith Power and Light office and our state affiliates, of which North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light is one. So it's such a joy for us to be able to gather and have these important conversations as a network, to really come together and bring our resources together. So thank you to National IPL and thank you to all of our state affiliates who have made this event possible. Over the next hour, we will be hearing from some amazing youth and young adult activists across the country who are engaged in climate activism via the broader IPL network, and I will introduce them shortly. But in the meantime, we invite all of you joining us to introduce yourselves in the chat. So for all of those attending, please tell us your name, where you're located, and the name of your faith community or your organization. Please just drop those into the chat. We would love to be able to welcome you in a more personalized way. And again, thank you so much for joining us. So all that said, let's go ahead and get started with our main event. Tonight, we are joined by high school junior and founder of the NCIPL Youth Leaders Initiative, Rishi Reddy, activist, organizer, and community builder in Berkeley, California, Danielle Platt, climate action advocate for Green Muslims, Sofia Gilani, and the youth program coordinator of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, Analyah dos Santos. You can read their full bios in the chat, and we're also so excited to be joined this evening by additional youth from Minnesota, high school juniors Makayla Freeman and Jaiden Ellington-Vassar. Thank you so much, Makayla and Jaiden, for being with us. And Analyah, Makayla, and Jaiden will split our interview questions in order to provide the perspective from Minnesota. So let's begin. Our first question this evening has to do with your story. So many of us who are on this webinar, who are attending this call, just watched the film I Am Greta. I know that not everyone got to watch that tonight, and if you didn't, that's okay. This call will still be deeply powerful, I think. But the film I Am Greta follows Greta Thunberg's activism and how she became involved in the youth movement for climate justice. So the first question that we want to ask all of you, all of our speakers, is how did you become involved in this work? What has motivated you? What encouraged you to do this work? And what is your story? And we will begin with Rishi.
Okay, hello. So yeah, I'm Rishi, and I'll start my story from the beginning. So I was always aware of needing to save energy, and the ice caps are melting, or the air is not safe to breathe somewhere, or the water has lead and it's toxic. And through these events across the world, I've been regularly exposed to environmental and climate justice issues, but thought the solution was better laws or using solar energy or some simple technological fix. And my interest in climate action stemmed from finding out that that was not the case, and much more has to be done. And the climate global health connection was also a big source of my passion for being interested in climate action. So I began my journey with NCIPL, North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, 3 years ago at a local church when I was interested in their massive solar energy system. And there they were giving a talk about how they implement the program. And I met the leader of the program, Mr. Reed, who introduced me to Miss Tuttle, Sarah, and Michelle of NCIPL, where I learned about their programs and support of sustainability projects with faith-based congregations. So through a project of my own at a temple I attend, I realized the energy and passion that youth have that can lead the goal of sustainability forward. And with this in mind, I founded the Youth Leaders Initiative with support from NCIPL leaders to harness this energy that we have towards that very goal. And really, what better place to do this than a place of worship, because everyone is connected in some way through faith, and we can all share the goal of protecting God's creation. So this was the path I could follow to turn small acts of turning off the lights or saving water to something larger and pave the way for other youth to do the same. A little more of my backstory. When I visit, my parents are from India, and when I visit India, the conditions are very far from perfect. In the United States here, when we have a power outage due to extreme weather or any other disaster, we complain, but we know it's going to be back in a few hours or a days. And we can breathe without a care, knowing the regulations to keep our air safe. But in India, the power is very unstable and the air pollution is very rampant. And you don't know when the next outage will be or the power will be back. So you hope you won't stay outside too long because of constant smog and smoke. In the US, we have regulations against this, but India and many other countries do not. And over the past few years, the United States has severely weakened this legislature, and the effects are showing through constant California wildfires, the strength of the coastal hurricanes, and even the virulence of the coronavirus, which has crossed 12 million cases. So by encouraging more congregations toward energy efficiency, this is one of the first steps we can take towards a better country and the world. And this is our future as youth, and we need to take action to protect it.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you for bringing your context from telling your story as you visited India and how that's influenced you, for uplifting climate change as a health issue, talking about energy and solar. I didn't say this, but I work very closely with Rishi in our Youth Leaders Initiative. He is in North Carolina and one of the youth that I have the privilege of working with on a regular basis. So thank you so much for being here, Rishi. Danielle, I'd love to hear your story.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle. I'm coming from Northern California. I live in Berkeley, but I'm currently staying with my parents for the holiday in Santa Cruz, California. I grew up in a pretty rural, disconnected area of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I was an only child. I lived a very pristine, very pure childhood, living in a really beautiful area that didn't have a lot of people in it. And my first introduction to what environmental injustice looked like was when a logging company entered the community and was working to lobby the community to get the right permits to be able to cut down trees in our small, tiny ecosystem to be able to generate a profit from them. In so doing, they would effectively ruin our local watershed, and they would also really destroy a very sacred space that our entire community held very importantly, and it was very important to us. Around that time, I also visited a city for the first time. And not only was I seeing environmental injustice start to play out, I also started to recognize what social and economic injustice looked like when seeing what urban poverty looked like. I'd seen rural poverty in our community, but had never seen what urban poverty looked like, which looks very different and is far more motivated through the history of racial injustice in our country and severe economic injustice perpetuated by multiple generations of systemic racism and systemic injustice. I constantly asked questions to my parents, to my family, to teachers, to people in school, why exactly it is that people wanted to generate a profit off our trees in our community. Why is it that when I went to San Francisco or went to New York, there were homeless people where there weren't those in our rural community? And no one could actually give me an answer. And namely because these issues are extremely complicated, and explaining systemic injustice and systemic racism to a really eager 12-year-old is not an easy thing to do. When I finally took an environmental science class in my senior year of high school, everything fell together. I finally understood that certain areas of the planet were disposable because of their profitability to certain companies or to certain communities. I finally understood that certain people were subjected, due to the economic system that we have, to more pollution and to unclean water and to dirty air, because it was easy to do so and it was profitable to do so. And that certain areas of the planet were historically, and rather have been historically, destroyed and exploited due to the profitability of that area for a very small number of people exploiting that product, exploiting that resource. And at the end of the day, I kind of understood just racial justice and social justice and environmental justice to be one and the same, that to be fighting for solutions to end urban poverty and rural poverty for that matter, we also needed to be addressing the same issues that came back to the economic incentive that the logging companies had to destroy our community. And at the end of the day, I am brought to the environmental movement because environmental injustice and social injustice are deeply, deeply important to me and have affected me personally. And this is an area where I find a great deal of inspiration to work towards. Thanks.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. You uplifted so much so beautifully, the connections between social and environmental injustice, that these are one and the same, the connections between racial injustice and economic injustice and environmental degradation, how our lives are so intertwined with the health of our ecosystems. I'm really grateful for all that you named. And also the history of sacrifice zones in our nation, knowing that so many places and so many people have been viewed and treated as if they are replaceable. That is a deeply distressing part of our history. And I'm grateful for you naming it, because naming it is a big part of this work. So thank you. Analyah.
Hey everyone. So again, my name is Analyah dos Santos, and I work with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. So I like to give a little bit of a background story. I actually come from a bit of a different background that's not necessarily environment. I was an international business major when I started college and switched over to public relations because I used to want to travel and bring people together. And so I knew that was one of my biggest skills, but I just didn't know how to engage it in this kind of manner yet. My mom raised myself and my brothers to be conscious individuals, but I never thought about myself as an activist. So I feel like I am still feeling like I was late to the environmental justice game because I joined 2 years ago when I was 23. And when I joined in, I really felt like everyone around me has already been doing this or has already been an activist or already knows what they're supposed to do and the right things to say. And I was like, well, shoot, I've been giving my energy to public speaking, and relation. So how can I join into this movement when it feels like everybody has already been doing it, already knows the lingo, et cetera, et cetera. So I did a program called HECUA. HECUA stands for Higher Education Consortium for Urban Affairs. And it drew me in because it was an environmental sustainability program. I actually had somebody come and present about it to a global studies class when I was in college. And I am a communications major, and I just took this random program around environmental sustainability, and it totally opened my eyes in a way that I'm super, super grateful for. And I just happened to have the right teacher at the right time and the right class of people to really meet me where I'm at and to make it a really exciting and gentle transition into this movement. So I actually got recruited out of HECUA by my boss, Julia, to start a summer camp that looked only into energy efficiency in North Minneapolis, where there is a large population. The primary population is people of color, Black and brown folks that are not wealthy, which is the community that I grew up in. And so I was like, okay, cool. This is super serendipitous. Let me connect with you and figure out how to do this summer camp. And upon talking with the folks in the community and at Redeemer Lutheran Church, which is where I grew up going to, and I went to all the summer camps there, I was like, how can I do something that fulfills this need to spread the information about climate justice while also meeting folks where they're at, so that if our goal is to grow the movement, how can we make it an understandable conversation for people that felt maybe like I had felt, like this is an untacklable mountain, and how can I enter into it? So a big part of what I do started off with looking at environmental communication and lack thereof, and doing research on that. But then how can we grow this movement by making it accessible, understandable, and fun, while also remembering to celebrate as we move forward? So yeah, that's how I got into this. Oh, and my program is called Youth in Power. I'm so sorry. So if you hear Makayla and Jaiden talk about Youth in Power, that's my baby program.
Thank you, Analyah. Thank you. I love your story of kind of finding this in school and this sort of happenstance. I had a class like that wasn't an environmental class, and I think that's beautiful when that happens, when those doors open. And your shout out to mentorship and Julia and the beautiful work that you do in your community, the ways that we can come back to our communities and really know them and understand them and do such grounded, beautiful work. So thank you for sharing your story. And Sofia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sofia. I work with Green Muslims based in the DC area. I live in Northern Virginia. And my story starts from always kind of being a green kid, liking the environment, doing presentations on endangered species. And growing up, you really only have like the recycling club is all you can do. There wasn't anything past that. There wasn't anything about the anthropogenic effects of climate change. Even in science classes, it never really addressed that. And so growing up in high school, I was really interested in immigration and policies in the Middle East because I am a second generation immigrant. My dad is from Pakistan and my mom's from Nicaragua. And so both of those countries are very in totally different spots, had different things going on, and are not contributing to climate change. Right now, 2 hurricanes have hit Nicaragua in the past couple of weeks. There was intense flooding in Karachi, Pakistan over the summer. And I can relate to Rishi about how when you go over there, it's just not the same. You know, you can have an event here that's going to take them weeks, if not months, to repair from. And so I've always cared about immigration and global events as it kind of pertains to me. And then in college, I got interested in environment. I majored in environmental science. And then I got out of my comfort zone a little bit and joined environmental justice organizations, where I was able to just dig deeper into it, make deeper connections, and relate to people that can teach me more about the political side of it or the legislative part of it. And now I learn a whole lot off Twitter from reporters at work in Richmond, Virginia, the state capital, to figure out what's going on and keep up to date. And so that's really what encourages me and what motivates me is my background, knowing that you have all these countries that contribute a tiny little itty bitty bit, yet get impacted the most. That's me.
Thank you, Sofia. That disproportionate, the disproportionate feeling of impacts is really a hard reality and such an important motivator, absolutely. And thank you for bringing all that you said about immigration into the mix. I think a lot about climate migration and how that's a piece of this work in terms of justice. Maybe that'll circle back, but thank you for all that you offered so generously. So our next question is about the work that you all do. So each of you are involved in the climate movement, some of you via IPL directly, and others of you through partner organizations. So we're going to hear a bit about your work now. Can you tell us a bit about what your work looks like, what challenges of climate change you and other youth of faith and conscience are seeking to address? And I would like to begin with Makayla on this question.
Hi, I'm Makayla, and I'm a part of Youth in Power with, it's with Analyah and Jaiden, another speaker. And I started 2 years ago, and we did an environmental justice and energy efficiency summer camp, and that's really where it started. But we told kids about what it is and tried to make it fun to learn about it so they could stick with it. And now we did it again this summer. It was a little bit different because of COVID, and it wasn't necessarily just kids, it was more teenagers. And then we did so many different things, but this year we're in it again throughout the school year. And recently we've been trying to make the green canopy or the tree canopy in our neighborhood thicker, because it's way less in northern Minneapolis than other communities in the state. And I mean, things like this is part of what my work looks like, just joining types of talks and Zooms and things that are really important that talk about these things. And like, I've done fundraisers and all types of events, just talking about it and advocating about what you can do, and just to get ear to ear so people know more about it. But yeah, that's really what my work looks like. And then the challenges we're facing is trying to get cleaner air and more people involved in the community to really know what this is, but a lot of volunteering and, trying to get our tree canopy in the neighborhood better, because I mean, the more trees you plant, the better the air in the community will be. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you uplifted, for naming all these exciting events. I mean, the summer camp sounds amazing, and thinking also about tree canopies and about clean air, and being willing to do these kinds of speaking engagements. Analyah wrote in the chat that Makayla and Jaiden and Layla, who couldn't make it tonight, are my pioneers and bright and shining stars of youth and power. So you're getting a lot of good kudos, and thank you for sharing that piece of your work. Let's go to Rishi. What does your work look like?
Okay, so like I mentioned, I founded the Youth Leaders Initiative with NCIPL. And the Youth Leaders Initiative is a youth network that's focused on educating, inspiring, and mobilizing youth to empower and lead faith and spiritual communities to act on climate. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but in the 2 years since the start of the initiative, we've enabled and supported many youth in climate action by providing knowledge and resources, such as the energy audit and savings analysis, for a variety of projects like fundraisers, recycling initiatives, and advocacy. In addition to this, we host events like the annual gathering of all youth leaders, which will transform this year because of COVID, and participate in advocacy events like the youth climate strikes and the 50th Earth Day celebrations. So these events really moving online. It was online meetings, webinars, town halls, and retreats. And we've been meeting every 2 weeks, working on planning other events, social media ideas, and just raising awareness in general. And so this extends to the webinars, which include about how youth can get involved in composting, and really an overview of the industry. And we also had a town hall with 2 elected appointed officials in charge of sustainability initiatives, where they talked about their work and answered questions from all the youth in attendance. So I guess with COVID, we're all moving online, but just to give an idea of what the projects were like before and what they will be after, the youth really work together in teams at their congregations to plan and decide on a project that they think will impact the congregation the most. Like one area, we had they wanted to replace the lights of the temple with LED light bulbs. So they did a fundraiser where they sold plants and baked goods to gather money, and they replaced the light bulbs. Another one is where we set up a recycling program at a temple, because the temple tried to do a recycling program previously, but it kind of fell through because it didn't really work out. So they devised a plan to make this work properly. So that's an idea of what we do.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of advocacy and awareness, kind of education work, lots of organizing. Thank you for all of that, and for the ways that you work with congregations and also youth individually. Sofia.
All right. So I want to say the climate work never really stops in my private life and personal and professional. And so I work with Green Muslims as a staff volunteer, very part-time. And so with Green Muslims, we do pre-COVID, we did meaningful watershed education experiences, because we're right in the Chesapeake Bay, which has 6 states contributing to the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So that's like a huge educational component that we do. We had an interfaith summer program last summer, pre-COVID. We have gone to mosques to give education, hiking, a little bit of a softer environmental angle, because in our area, we're still kind of introducing local Muslims to the environmental movement. And so something that we try to do is not come off too strong, to make people weary or feeling like they're being targeted as the reason for why it's happening. And then I also used to work at a landfill, and so I brought my climate work there. And we would do landfill tours, and I would talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the impacts of CO2 from life cycle analysis of a water bottle, and how you're extracting petroleum, you're releasing methane, you're releasing all these gases, and then you have transportation emissions, all to maybe be recycled, but most likely being thrown away. And so it never really stops. Anytime I can talk to somebody, I will mention it. I worked at CVS, and I also talked about the environment and climate action there. But with Green Muslims, it is a lot of education, is definitely my passion. Social media managing is like the nitty gritty stuff that you have to schedule your posts so that everybody knows what's going on. And going forward, a lot of these Zoom webinars, with IPL, DMV, and other organizations near me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you for uplifting this work anywhere you are. I think that's beautiful and vital. And thank you for naming the technical pieces of this work, and also that kind of deeper, that bringing people into the connection with what it is that we're trying to save and to love, and why this is vital. There's a lovely quote from a Senegalese environmentalist, Baba Diom, who says that we cannot save places we don't love, and we cannot love places we don't know, and we cannot know places we haven't learned. So that hiking, that getting out into the world and being with each other, that's a piece of this to help us know and love our watersheds, our ecosystems, and each other, and then therefore be able to work to save them. So thank you for all of that. Danielle.
Yeah, so I'll flag first that I'm an employee at an organization called Center for Sustainable Energy, where I do quite a bit of organizing and education advocacy around sustainable and electrified transit use. And CSE is a partner organization of IPL. However, the work that I feel most passionate about is with Sunrise Movement, a national organization focused on bringing about the Green New Deal and creating millions of good jobs and stopping climate change through the framework of the Green New Deal. And in my work as virtually a full-time volunteer with Sunrise, our work is split into 2 main buckets. One is mutual aid, local organizing, local initiatives, everything from providing resources for underprivileged folks affected by fires or affected by current COVID conditions, and providing and generating support for mutual aid networks, or supporting work to get natural gas bans for building ordinances, or supporting utility justice campaigns to support CCAs, community choice aggregation systems, instead of IOUs, investor-owned utilities. Especially in California, we have a very sort of dramatic reality with outdated power lines and investor-owned utilities sort of damaging our ecosystems and damaging our communities and contributing to fires. So we have this local organizing front that we work on. Then we have our national and statewide organizing front, which is sort of laser focused on Green New Deal type legislation, on omnibus type bill passage and people power development and building in order to get that legislation passed. So largely that focuses on introducing legislation at the state level and at the congressional level, working to get the right people elected and making sure that people who are climate deniers, who don't support climate justice initiatives, are kicked out of state legislatures and are kicked out of Congress. And in this last election cycle, we did a lot of that work in coalition with many, many, many groups across the United States. And finally, people power. We as much legislation as you can introduce as many pieces of legislation as you want and try to get as many people elected as you want. But unless you have the real support of the community around you, you're not going to be able to get any progressive legislation passed, no matter how notable it is. And ultimately, Sunrise, in coalition with many organizations across the country, have a goal of engaging 3.5% of the United States population to be focused on environmental, community, and racial justice. And with that number, which historically has never failed to actually get massive pieces of legislation passed, we can talk about that further. There's some really cool numbers indicating that when you have 3.5% of a population engaged and focused on massive change, that you get that change. Our goal is to get those numbers focused on environmental justice and pass the Green New Deal, and achieve the type of environmental justice goals that we have in this country through massive people power and through engaging people from all walks of life in order to be engaged in this movement.
You're all just uplifting so many things, and it's wonderful. I guess I'll just highlight, I'm so grateful for the naming of both this kind of climate mitigation and climate resilience work. Mutual aid funds are so vital in terms of helping those who are impacted by the worst of climate change, including wildfires on our West Coast. And then work around the Green New Deal, work around legislation, all the work that we've all been involved in over this election year. So thank you for uplifting that legislative work at the state and national level, as many of our other speakers have also done. Yeah, so moving on to our next question. We want to talk about vision, because that's another really important piece of this work. We can criticize what's wrong with our country all day long. We can criticize what's wrong with the climate crisis all day long, but what are we trying to achieve? If we can really paint that vision, if we can really name it well, then we can inspire people to do this work in I think more impactful and more effective ways. So we want to talk about your vision, and this question is, what would it mean to achieve climate justice in your eyes? What is your vision for a livable, just, and compassionate future? And I want to begin with Jaiden.
Hello, again, I'm Jaiden. My biggest vision right now is to educate. I think more people need to be educated on what's going on in the world. I know for myself, I joined the climate movement last year, but before last year, I really didn't know. I wasn't understanding what was happening in my world that I live in my neighborhood. And looking back, I'm looking at all of the signs and all the things that I see in my neighborhood. Like, for Minnesota, my area has the highest of asthma, and it's because of the air pollution. And I didn't even realize because I wasn't educated on it. So I think the biggest thing we can do right now is to educate youth and older people, because we're all on this earth together. So it'd be best to educate each and every one of us. And it would be great for me because my family, your friends, people that you love are on this earth. So if you take better care of it, it's going to take better care of you, essentially. So it's just going to keep going. It's going to pass on. So if you give a little bit of yourself to help your community and your earth, the earth is going to give back to you and help you live the fullest and brightest life that you could possibly good. So that's really my vision, is education, getting on in the community, plant a tree. I just planted trees all through my neighborhood. And it was it was just very heartwarming and very opened my eyes to a lot of things. So after that, I started planting gardens and educating people in my neighborhood and the other nonprofits that I'm a part of. I started pushing climate justice. Like, do you really know what's happening in your neighborhood? Do you know what's happening in your world? And they've been starting to do it little by little. I'm starting to grow for people I know, and they're sharing their stories, and it keeps growing. And I feel like if everybody did something small, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, tell a family member, it's going to keep growing. It's like a rumor, but it's a real rumor. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that vision of all of us understanding our connection to each other and to this earth, and how our health connects to this, and an educated world, a world where we get this deeply and we love each other well. That's a beautiful vision, and I'm deeply inspired by it. Sophia, what is your vision?
Um, I would have a two-part vision. First one, I'm gonna jump off of what Danielle said. I love the Green New Deal. I love the Sunrise Movement. I love the podcast. I think that's a great vision for us to have, right? Good jobs that don't hurt the environment, that pay well, is radically transformative and could do so much. But I also think outside of the United States, thinking back to Pakistan and Nicaragua, I want to know that you have marginalized, totally blanking, island communities, coastal communities that are being impacted the most from climate change, to not have all the brunt when they haven't contributed to it. You know, I know that living in Northern Virginia, I'm fairly safe, right? I live in the suburbs, I'm okay, but I have my grandma in Nicaragua who I don't want to have her house battered by hurricanes. I have family in Pakistan that I don't want battered by floods. I visited Hawaii. I don't want Hawaii to get any more hurricanes. I don't want indigenous communities in the Amazon to have their forests taken from them. And so for me, climate justice goes international, and it's especially indigenous communities that have voices, that have sovereignty, and don't have their land and their practices taken away from them when they can contribute so much. I do just like everyone, everywhere to be able to go outside and enjoy the nature and the environment that they have around them. Because not everybody is as lucky as I am, where I could go 10 minutes down the street and I have a national park, or I could go 3 hours and I'm at another national park. A lot of people that don't have the transportation or the resources near them, right? If you don't have it, you can't go there, especially in urban areas, which I think is a really important point that we touched on earlier, is having better green spaces in cities, because that's better for people. So all of that contributes to my vision.
Well, I'm super moved by your vision as well, and naming justice at home and abroad, justice the world over, justice that really emphasizes communities on the margins who are often sacrificed, indigenous voices and indigenous folks being centered, justice for all of those communities. That is a vision of a more beautiful and just and transformative world, and I'm deeply grateful for it. Thank you, Sophia. Danielle, let's hear from you. What is your vision?
Love the shout out, Sophia. Thank you so much. Let's collaborate, girl. So my vision is that every person, every community, every ecological system on the planet will be able to survive and thrive no matter what the effects of climate change are. At this point, we really have passed a point of no return. We can institute a policy like a Green New Deal. We can cut emissions today, but as much, and like maybe there'll be more research that comes out, but as of today, we have reached a point at which we cannot stop the effects of climate change from continuing. But humans have a lot of ingenuity, and we can create community and create solutions in a really, really beautiful way. And I really envision us creating a community at the national level and maybe even at the international level. I love your vision, Sophia, and I want that, of every community and every person having enough food to eat, clean water, clean air, a home, a community space that caters to their emotional needs, every ecological system having the research and the technology instituted by compassionate communities that want to maintain those ecological systems and keep them healthy, no matter what the effects of climate change are on those communities. That's my vision for climate change, that we can continue to survive and thrive and be even more cohesive as an international human community in collaboration with and living alongside nature as we move into this new sort of unprecedented era of climatic change. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. And what I hear from you is a vision of resilience, you know, that that we can continue to love each other and create and do good work. I think it can be hard for those of us who've been involved in the climate movement for a while, whether that's been a couple years or a couple months, it can be disheartening to read climate science and to think about this and to work with communities who don't really think this is important maybe yet. And it's hard work. So saying, yeah, maybe we've reached a tipping point, but we can still do the work of loving each other. And then maybe I'm adding to your vision, but I'm holding it also.
No, I love it. Like ultimately, I totally agree with your like recapping of that, like creating a vision. I know we're going on to the next person, but just to thank you for that. Ultimately, we want, like, we're not gonna be able to stop what people have done in the past and what industries have done in the past, but we can change and create a trajectory that moves forward in a way that isn't yet precedented and that can go further than what we've done in the past at creating resilience and creating justice.
Yeah. Some folks I work with call this the work of midwifery, birthing something beautiful. Rishi, what is your vision?
Okay, so I'm in my junior year of high school. So when I was thinking about the vision in the future, I remember the words of Greta Thunberg, where we're all studying, all students are studying, but if there's no future, then what are we going to do with what we're studying? So despite that, it looks kind of bleak somewhat. My vision for a greener, brighter future is a bit paradoxical because I don't really expect technology to slow down its advancement, and don't really know if I wanted to, be interested in computer science. But I do imagine a lot more cleaner technology to, instead of the pollution, since we have more science and a better understanding of the environment, cleaner technology that can help us live side by side with a healthy natural environment. But looking at the near future, no one should really have to worry about losing their homes because the ice caps are melting very far away, or develop severe asthma because of the countless harmful chemicals that they're breathing in their local area. And a local example of this is the Warren County incident here in NC, where trash was dumped because the residents were poor and people of color, and they couldn't fight back against what was happening. And I know this falls under environmental justice, but it's not really limited to this issue, and it's also increasing proportionally with climate justice issues. And so realistically, I know it's not possible for everyone to be on the same footing in life, but my vision of the future is one where this footing doesn't fatally compromise your health or your livelihood, be it houses that are cheap because they're under the flood line, or incidents like Warren County. The environment should be a safe and beautiful place for everyone, and not an unnatural and disproportionate source of danger and disaster.
Thank you, Rishi, for that vision of safety and for uplifting Warren County in North Carolina and the beginning of the EJ movement here in NC. And that our environment should be a place of beauty and a place of safety and a place that is sacred, as many of you have named. So I'm deeply grateful for your vision and for all of the pieces that you uplifted. This last question that we're moving into is kind of a fun one. Because why not? Why not have a fun question? And this, it's also important. It's not just fun. It's about art. And I think art has a really vital role in encouraging us in this work, in motivating us, in helping us when we're struggling, and also in uplifting people into the work who maybe weren't there yet. A beautiful song or a beautiful poem can awaken something in someone, can awaken action and activism. So we're gonna share some of the art that awakens and motivates us. So this question, I'll state it a little bit differently. This question comes from a webinar that highlighted youth activism a few months ago, when Reverend Michael Malcolm of Alabama Interfaith Power and Light asked speakers to share a song that helps them stay motivated in the work. So we just expanded it a bit, and we're asking that you share a song or a piece of art that motivates you in this work. So let's begin maybe with Analyah.
Yes, so I have this thing, and I wonder if this affects anyone else, but I constantly have music playing in my head, like throughout this entire webinar, there's been one song playing through my head. And it's called Waiting For by Rum Gold. And Rum Gold, I'll put the YouTube link in here. Rum Gold, I like is a newish artist, I guess, but he has a super, super beautiful, like ethereal voice. And yeah, I like to sing, and not like formally or anything, but it does remind me of celebration. And a big part of what I do around environmental justice is encouraging folks to celebrate. It is very intense, the kind of work that we're doing, and the fact that we are in a state of crisis. So remembering to celebrate and kind of release your attention and stuff by singing and listening to beautiful voices, I think is really keeps me going.
Beautiful. I look forward to making a playlist from all of your selections. Danielle, what is a piece of art that motivates you?
I am really inspired by a lot of the songs and the chants that came out of the civil rights movement. And there are several songs which really, really empower me that we often sing at direct actions. One of them is called We Are Going to Rise Up. And it's about ultimately class solidarity and community solidarity, rising up against oppressive forces and prevailing against them. And that really inspires me, especially when it's sung by a whole group of people singing together in a moment of fear or adversity.
Thank you. That is a song that definitely does send chill bumps down your spine. It's a really beautiful one. Sophia.
Thanks. My song is The Show Goes On by Lupe Fiasco. It popped up in the car the other day, and I thought of it about how it addresses social justice issues. And then at the end, it just says the show goes on. You know, you keep on fighting, which is the motivation that we need when you're in this work, because it's really daunting. It bums you out, but you have to know that you have the power. The show goes on. You show up and you're going to do the work. That's my artwork.
Thank you. And if you guys can drop these in the chat, we'd love to see them. Makayla, you share your piece.
I have a piece of artwork, and I'll explain it, but I'll also put it into the chat. It's a sunflower, and it has, in the middle, it says climate justice, and the petals have like different things that go into it. A few of them are like clean air, wildlife protection, fair wages, equal pay, stuff like that, and racial equality. And I think it really motivates me because they're all like aspects that have not truly been completed or like fully tackled yet, but they're still like motivating pieces that are all related to climate justice. So I think it's really a motivating piece.
I agree. I clicked on your art earlier. I had access to it earlier, and it's really motivating and lovely, and really shows the intersectional nature of this work. So definitely check that out. Jaiden, your art.
I actually chose a song. It's I Like That by Janelle Monáe. One part in specific really resonates with me because it talks about I may be the only one, but that's okay. And a lot of times with climate justice, I'm usually the only African American girl. A lot of times I'm very, besides like Makayla, obviously, but Makayla's in my group, so like she counts as the one. A lot of times you don't really see a lot of us in like climate justice, and it's like it's okay because I'm representing all of us. I represent my family, people that look like me, because the big thing with earlier talking about education, a lot of people in my community, like Black and brown people, really don't know, why their kids have asthma, or why the air is bad, or why this and that. So that was, that really resonated with me, and just my background and my family and my community. Yeah.
Thank you, Jaiden. Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability and sharing your story. That's really powerful. Rishi, What motivates you?
Yeah, so a piece of art that motivated me in this work is not a song or a painting, but a poem. And a little background, it was written by a young girl named Lily, who was one of the leading youth of the group at a church we worked with, which was United Church of Chapel Hill. And she wrote this poem to display her love for the world and nature, and we shared it among the hundreds of people at a major event at the church. It's not too long, so I'll send the full one in the chat, but I'll read a short excerpt. God made this beautiful earth. God made the birds who sing a song to me every morning. God made the raccoons taking a sip of water in the late afternoon. Humans have destroyed what God has given us. We have broken his trust. Now we must restore it. I know this is what God wants because he gave me one last thing, hope. God gave me hope that we can change the future, that we can stop this. So it's a little heartbreaking that this was written by a 13-year-old girl, but just like she has hope, it gives me and maybe others who read it hope for the future. And I'll send it in the chat.
Thank you so much, Rishi, for uplifting Lily's voice and sharing that beautiful poem. It definitely does give me hope. It's really, really, really beautiful. And if any of those of us attending this call want to drop into the chat what gives you hope and the art and the poems that motivate you, that would be lovely as well. We would love to hear that. We do have time for one question, and I want to get to that, so bear with me while I pull that back up. Yes, so this question comes from Phoebe Morad, and it says, do you have any advice for sharing the urgency without making young people overwhelmed with anxiety? And I know that Analyah had said that she would like to hit on this, and anyone else who would like to answer it as well. Do you have any advice for sharing the urgency without making young people overwhelmed with anxiety?
I love technology. I think it's so cool that you can be like, I want to answer that. So yeah, that's actually a big part of what kind of motivated me to find a place for myself in this work. A lot of people my age in their mid-20s are like, oh, I'm not going to have kids. And that's totally fine if that's your choice. You know, it's no judgment about that. But the reason that is the case is because of the state of the world. And when I like started to hear that by a few people that are my age, I was like, oh, dang, that's really what people are thinking, that we don't want to like continue a next generation because things are so bad. So there is this huge air of climate anxiety that is a new thing, and that our generation and younger generations have to get acquainted with. It's a new phrase, but it is really, really important that we be upfront about the urgency and the need for everyone to do what they can now. But it has to be coupled with the other news that it's not our individual fault for the state of the climate. So it's kind of like it's a challenge to figure out how to address this in a way that you can still have people feel empowered to empower others and not letting that anxiety overcome them. So I feel like what I tend to do is say, okay, well, we do have to do something right now because we actually don't have a lot of time to get acquainted with this idea. And the first step is recognizing that we are in a state of crisis. We are not just talking about global warming or climate change. We are talking about climate in a state of crisis. So there are things that we can do as individuals, but we also have to keep that air of celebration and camaraderie and building relationship that tends to go out the door when we talk about crisis, because we're like, this is what's happening. This is how we need to change. Here's the solutions. You should be scared because it's scary. But instead of naming that fear, I think it's a challenge in crafting your communication to say that here are the opportunities to make this shift happen. Here are the things that we can do, instead of like, oh, there's existential crisis and there's dread that needs to be partnered with that crisis. So presenting the opportunities for shifting that narrative at the same time as underlining the urgency, it has to be a carefully crafted conversation that is new. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Can I also add in something?
Mm-hmm.
I think with a lot of youth, you have to start out small but urgently. So you really have to like let them know, like, okay, you could start here, but let them know the effects. Like we have to like just coming from my perspective, to make it real for me, I have to know the effects. So I have to know what's going on for it to happen. So hey, let's plant a tree. And then like, okay, planting a tree is gonna help the air and this and that. You to let them know like the bigger effect, and also a lot of things tying it into other things like climate justice. Like let's tie it into college, right? So do these programs. You can get an internship for college. You know, it may, like, some people don't want to go straight in for climate justice. That's just not the way they want to do it. But I'm like, you can tie it into other things. Like you can get a scholarship for college. Like you need to start doing this, and they can slowly progress and get deeper and deeper into climate justice and climate change without even knowing it. They might be looking into a different goal, but either way, they're going to be doing something good for the climate and something good for themselves. Because a lot of teens are selfish. So, you want to try to okay, you help, kind of like a you help me, I help you. But with them helping with the climate, you're helping everybody. You're helping bigger than yourself. You're helping the people on this earth, the animals, the plants, life. And you're helping yourself, like, oh, I got a cool internship, fun, you get to travel or plant trees and do gardens and knocking. Personally, I find it really fun just to do door knocking, and I've planted gardens and outreach, youth outreach, and all of that, all of the above. So I think that's a really good way. Start out little, and help me, I help you, help everybody.
I would also like to jump in real quick. One of the things I did my last semester at college was hold a climate grief workshop with how to deal with it. You need to take self-care, you need to take breaks. And I think a really important thing is to have a network, right? IPL is a huge network. Sunrise Movement is a huge network. And I know personally having my peers that support me, that know exactly what I'm feeling, helps so much. And also being able to see what other people are doing. I'm in several Sunrise group chats, and I peek in every now and then just to see what's going on. And it's uplifting. I love to see it. I love to see work against Dominion power. It's a big issue in Virginia. I know in North Carolina as well. And it's empowering. That's what helps me with that anxiety, is to showcase what's happening, what's great, and then to give that support, to have that network, and to know it's okay to take a break if you've had a stressful week, if you're planning a big Zoom and you need to take a couple of days off, if you're doing in-person action, that it's okay to do the work and take a break because you deserve it.
Yeah, I agree with what Sophia said about that. It's uplifting to know that there's other people with you. It's not really a war, it's a movement, and understanding that you're working together towards this goal, towards your future, is a big way to not be anxious about it, but be hopeful about it instead.
Absolutely. I know Danielle wanted to say something briefly, so.
Yeah, very, very briefly. And I have so much hope from this conversation. I'm really, really happy that there is this community of people working across different organizations doing this work. Part of my perspective is that every era has had its challenges, on the local level and on the global level. For a long time, it was imperialism, and and in the more recent era, it was localized environmental degradation due to the Industrial Revolution and the effects of the Industrial Revolution and lack of climate protections, with many other issues sort of peppering those histories.
Yeah.
Currently, the climate crisis is a global issue. And as the world has become smaller with the advent of the internet, we have sort of an incredible opportunity to be working cross-class, cross-community, internationally, to be addressing the symptoms of 300, 400 years of oppression and environmental exploitation and community exploitation. And we have the opportunity as young people to invent a new future, which otherwise might not be possible because the symptoms of these challenges of slavery, of imperialism, of exploitation, of dispossession of people from their native lands had never been seen in such a clear way before. And ultimately, the climate crisis is the combination of a loss of land, a proper land management, and a loss of climate and planet protection. And it's a result of extreme economic exploitation of our natural resources. And by coming together as an international community of young people, we have the opportunity to create justice that never really was possible before. And we also have an impetus to create a future that never would have been recognizable before, because there might not have been a reason to work towards a more just future because of it. So I see in some ways the climate crisis as like a really empowering, the reality itself is really dim and gloomy and terrifying, but the reality we can create because things are so dire and because they are a linchpin, this is a linchpin moment, is really inspiring. And I think we can create a far more just future because of this opportunity for change.
Absolutely. I think there was so much energy around this question, and that leads me to think that maybe it might be nice for the panelists, those of you who are here, and maybe Sarah and Ashiki and others in the IPL network, to answer this question and send some resources to you, Sarah, that we could distribute via IPL, resources around how do we deal with this anxiety, and how do we keep doing this work. I think it would be wonderful and add to our resilience as activists and as communities if we had more tools around that work. So thank you for all your beautiful responses. Thank you for sharing yourselves and your stories so generously. I feel like I've gotten to know you in an hour, and that's really lovely to be in community in a time when that's difficult. So thank you again for sharing your vision, your inspiration, and for helping us to see what a more just and beautiful world might look like. And I'm so grateful for all that you're doing in your communities, in your states, with the people that you know and love. Thank you for being beacons of hope in this world as we strive to create a world in which climate justice is actualized. So I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Paulos. And again, thank you all.
Yes, I just want to add my thanks to everyone. One of my favorite quotes is just rising to the top and hearing you all, from Abraham Joshua Heschel, a Jewish theologian, who says, "We create the world by the words we use to describe it." And you all have been creating the world we all want to live in tonight with your vision of what's possible. And I am so inspired to know that this is the world that my grandchildren are going to be able to live in, the one that you create. So thank you so much. And I also want to encourage all attendees tonight to please join the National IPL mailing list if you haven't already. Sarah Ogletree will pop that link in the chat box right now, and also to join the mailing list of your state IPL affiliate so that you can get involved with what people are doing in your state on the ground. So that link is also going into the chat box. And I want to thank Sarah Ogletree for moderating this evening's conversation. Really, really appreciate that. And thanks to all of our speakers, all the IPL affiliates from North Carolina, California, Minnesota, and IPL DMV for contributing to this project tonight. So the webinar has been recorded, and you can find it on IPL National and North Carolina's YouTube channels.